Just one. Now two. Okay. Here we are. Interview with Grandma and Grandpa.
I am Jerry Brown, officially Jerome F. Brown. I'm 87, be 88 in February.
And I'm Grandma Brown, McMunn Brown, and
You're 86 right now.
She's 86 right now.
something like that.
Something like that.
To a mutual friend.
Just walking in the halls,
Yeah.
saying hi.
And then
And I said, "Hi, Joe," at first. Do you remember that?
Nope.
Yeah, I said, "Hi, Joe," because they all looked alike.
Then Marge Becker.
That's his older brother.
Then
Right.
Marge Becker arranged for a date for us.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a blind date, even though you guys knew each other. They
A
set
little
it up.
bit, yeah. Well, I remember that her dad was a teacher there, and I didn't know whether that was going to be a good deal or not, because I'd had him as a teacher, and I thought, no, I don't know about this, you know.
I mixed him up with his brother. And his older brother and his younger brother both looked alike. They all looked alike. And so I kind of had a hard time saying hi to the right one for a long time.
Well,
it snowed.
it was snowing, and it was the 28th of December. We were going to go down to the Ozarks and went to Kansas City, and couldn't go on there, so that's where we went. And of course, we always took a ribbing because I wanted to go see the Big 8 basketball tournament during that time. So, and then I found out later my little brother did the same thing when he got married the day before we did a couple of years later. But as far as the wedding, we parked our car at the neighbors across the alley, and John McMullen found it anyway and had it all painted up for us and everything.
That's right.
And Grandma, what was it like for you? What do you remember from that day?
Just that it was snowy and wet and not really what you wanted.
We waited until the next summer. We were both going to be working in Minnesota at the camp. And so we decided, okay, we will take our honeymoon, and went to California and went down through New Mexico, Arizona, and stayed with relatives, and went to Disney World, and then up to San Francisco, and then to Salt Lake City, and on back that way. So we spent about 2 weeks going that way for basically our honeymoon before we went back up to camp in Minnesota.
Well, they say it's good luck if it rains on your wedding day. I think snow means lifelong luck. So that's how I think.
Well, I like the way that you interview.
Pretty nice. It really was. It was a different time, and of course, growing up on the farm, that was a big thing, and literally walking to school. Always kid about uphill both ways in the snow, but sometimes it was not uphill, but walking in the snow. We always walked to school unless it was nice weather. Sometimes we'd ride the horse over there to cross the couple neighbors' pastures to get to school. One room schoolhouse was about 2.5 miles away from where we lived, and we'd walk up the road to meet another family, and they had a kid about my age, and we'd walk there and always kid everybody I was valedictorian in my class because I was the only one in it. And then 40s were pretty good, and like I say, it was different, and I always worked and had things to do.
I worked. I had I was a waitress, and I wouldn't want to do that again. That's a hard game. It was just really a pretty ideal time to grow up, because you didn't have all the trouble that you have now. So,
And even despite the war going on in the early half of the decade, it wasn't too disruptive.
Well, I
out here.
remember a little bit about the war because I had an uncle that had to walk the gas lines from one pumping station to the other to make sure that nobody was blowing them up. But you get to thinking about in the middle of Kansas, or when anybody going to blow up any gas lines or anything. And I can remember picking up, scrap iron and scrap metals and everything. They always had in school drives that way. And then I can remember when the war was over, the celebrations, and everything like that. So, but then after the war, it was everything was moving pretty good. Everybody had jobs and everything, and it worked out good. A lot of fun because there were probably only about 2 or 3 kids that had cars. And before you could go on a date, you had to make sure that the guy that had the car had a date too, so that you could double. And there were a lot of times double or triple dates. Luckily, I had a good friend that had a nice new car all the time, and so we always got to do that. But yeah, high school was good.
It was
a lot of fun.
It was an ideal time to grow up. We didn't have all the challenges that kids have now.
The kid that grew up south of tracks with us was Kenny Olm, and John Whittington were my good friends, and then Larry Beggs, who lived north of the tracks up in the north end of town. He's the one who had the new car all the time. Kenny Olm and I played baseball together, and Whittington and I did a lot of hunting together and that type of thing. We had a vacant lot south of our house down there, and there were more tag football games and basketball games played on that dirt than any place else, And so, but yeah, you just got together, you did things, and made your own excitement or whatever. Of course, one of them or two of them have passed away now, but still keep in contact with the others from time to time. So,
oh, we just had the greatest friends. We knew each other from kindergarten on through high school or college. Judy Morgan had a car.
That was a big thing. You better find a friend that had a car.
And so she would drive us around quite a bit, and through water, out in the country. We didn't know where we were, but we had a good time. So, and we still continued to have good times. Well, I had real easy parents. My dad was a teacher.
She buzzing? Is that?
Well, that's her.
That's just a phone. That's
not. No, that's not a phone. That's her diabetes.
Do we need to?
Yeah, it's no problem.
Is no problem? All right.
No problem.
What was I saying?
Your dad was a teacher.
And my mother was a teacher too, but she didn't teach full time. She did a lot of substituting, and so it was just all one of those deals where everybody knew my mother and dad. My dad, he grew a huge garden of tulips. So we had a huge garden of tulips. I had really good parents, and so did my friends. So I didn't have to adjust very much to anything. So
we were, the folks, or dad especially, like baseball and sports and everything, and so we always made a trip to watch the Cardinals about once a year, and or we always went to all the basketball games at Emporia State. Even I can remember during this time of the year, when we lived on the farm, we had a driveway that went back toward the house, and it snowed, and he parked the car outside because at that time he was working in Emporia. And he said, if we get that driveway shoveled out tonight, we'll go to the ball game. And I remember working all day long making sure that driveway was shoveled out so we could go to ball games. But we always took in a lot of, sporting events that way. And I know when I played baseball, they were always there and everything. But the big thing was going to St. Louis and watch the Cardinals. Of course, the Royals were not there. And that was a long trip, and everything. So you go that way and then go to K-State games and that type of thing. And mainly kind of centered around a lot of sports and that type of thing. So. But Mom was involved in that too. She'd go too, and that was part of what we did.
Now, my dad in high school and college was an athlete. He played football, and there was some baseball in there
But he
too.
was a pretty good track person.
And he was good at track.
How would you describe your parents in one word?
Hardworking. That's 2 words. They were hardworking. But you just had to, and I would say Mom was a good cook, and always, and I never seen her look at a recipe. In other words, it was all the stuff she cooked, and everything. It was there, and so I'd say they were just hardworking.
They were fun. Yeah, they were fun. Ooh.
I think for mine was the first time we took a trip as a family and everything. In those days, you took a trip, but you stayed with relatives. There were no hotels, motels, or whatever. We did. So we stayed in 2 or 3 different places going to Colorado. And I was about 8 years old the first time we were off the farm. And went up Pikes Peak and that type of thing into Denver, but stayed with various relatives all the way out and back. And I can remember that was kind of special to be go on a trip, get away from the farm, that type of thing. That was interesting.
Well, we went on trips too, but we didn't have as many relatives around. And so we didn't stay with relatives. We stayed in motels.
That can be fun.
Yeah.
And what's a trip that you can remember taking that you really enjoyed?
Colorado, I think, is the biggest memory that I have. Getting to go with the family, and they were good. They just took us everywhere, and they were good.
I would say that in '54, American Legion team here, we played in the state tournament, got second in the state tournament, and we won our first ball game against a team from Parsons, and we found out many years later that one of the players on that team was a gentleman by the name of Jerry Baumgartner, who was the principal to high school, and who we've done since that time crop adjusting and everything. So we've known, and he was a pitcher. And to this day, he doesn't admit that I got a hit off of him that won the game. But I think the whole state tournament out there, we got second, and was very good. And then, of course, a couple of games in college when I was freshman, but I don't remember too much about that. But I would say that state tournament was a big thing, and that whole season was very good too. So, but state tournament was really good.
Well, I redid furniture.
Really?
Yeah, I did do that, and so I did my first chair there. It was a rocking chair.
That sounds like your dad with his tools, my dad with his tools, you with doing this furniture.
Yeah.
It's just all in the family. I love it.
I would say the big thing is that, while I was doing my thing as coaching or refereeing and everything, she was able to keep your dad and sister and the kids pretty much in line. It was almost like wait till your dad gets home type of thing almost, but I appreciate the fact that she kept everything, going in a positive direction that way. Because I was gone a lot, as coaching and then refereeing, and then as an administrator, as athletic director, why many nights were gone, and so she was able to keep that going and clothe and feed them and the whole bit and everything. So.
And that was a lot of work. Well, he kept us fed, and there was just never any worry. It was just nice not to be able to worry.
I would say pretty quiet.
Were you quiet?
And you know, I never did worry too much about it in terms of where he was or what he was doing, because I knew the people that he was with, you know, were good people. So, you know, I didn't have to worry about that. And then,
Well,
like I say, he was by far a much better student than I ever thought of being, you know. And I was, like I say, when we were in high school, grades were not that important, you know. They were important, but just having good times was okay, and you got by. I think Pat, you know, he'd studied a heck of a lot more than I ever did, you know, and I don't want anybody to see what my grades were, you know. I made it, but you know, but I think he was more studious and that type of thing, more quiet, and he'd get down there in the basement and just stay there, you know. And I thought he was down there most time, and he was, you know. But so that was a big thing.
well, when we moved to Kroll Street, we had a lot of kids in our
Oh,
yard
Oh,
Yeah,
all the time.
all the
yeah.
time.
the whole street was ours. You know, people are afraid to drive down the street with all the kids there, and there were a lot of them. I think, what did we count at one time? 15 or so,
Oh, something like that.
You know.
Uh-huh.
all out in the street and doing whatever they're doing. You know.
Well, we had a basketball goal too.
Well, we didn't have it there, but they had it
Yeah.
up at the school. We didn't have it
No, we had one in our yard.
Kroll in the backyard.
there. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, at Kroll. Yeah, yeah.
It was a
Okay.
9-footer because you were I wasn't big enough to
Yeah.
shoot on a 10-footer.
I was
so-
thinking of 8th Street. We didn't have it over there, but we did. Yeah, that's right. on
You were
Kroll.
gonna raise it, but it never got raised before we
Okay.
moved.
Yeah.
I think having a dad as the principal definitely put a little more pressure on him to get those good grades. But he also does enjoy.
Well,
his
that's
studying.
the other thing. You know, I don't think most people did not know or didn't want to know that Dad's down there in the office. Molly, she wanted everybody to know that he was down there in the office, you know, type of thing. So, and then Pat helped me when after I got done coaching and everything, we'd filmed. Believe it or not, we were on football, did all the
There
filming
you
and
go.
everything. And Pat would help me on that. And there were some places where we had crawl on top of bleachers and roofs
Press
and everything.
boxes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that type of thing, and then get the film back down to the coach right away so they could get it off so they could study it and everything. So
that's where I got my
That's
filmmaking skills
right.
from.
That's where
Well,
that
thanks
came
to Dad. Yeah, I
from.
guess so.
Well, you know, we had 5 years between
Yeah.
each of the kids. So it was like having a family of 5, and then we had another 5 and another 5.
well, you know, I would think that, you know, Pat and Peggy were pretty much like, you know, they liked to study and they were involved in a lot of things that way. Molly was kind of a free spirit from that standpoint, you know, and needed a little more attention than, you know, that type of thing. So, but yeah, I'd say Peggy and Pat were very similar in that way because they studied. And the other thing too, that they all had the shopper route, which was a little weekly newspaper, and Sunday night they'd bring it, and you didn't even have to tell them they're in there wrapping them up, and so they could get them thrown and everything. So. Throw them out the window of the car, but I think all 3 of you did that, didn't you? The shoppers.
I think so.
Yeah.
Now you say out the window of the car. I remember being in the back of the pickup truck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was the back of the pickup mostly.
So that they were. It's all just doing what they were doing. Well, after we retired, we took a lot of trips. Both with Greta's brother and his wife, and then she and I together. Then we went on some bus trips too. I would say the New England trip that we took with the bus group at one time was a nice trip. And of course, I always think of the Western trips that we took the kids up to watch Custer get killed and that type of thing.
We visited
Every
the place in Montana where Custer's last stand occurred.
Okay.
Well, we had a camper, a little tent trailer, and went all the way into Yellowstone and everywhere else that way. And
Well, and that's where we went down the which river?
oh
Snake.
yeah, down the Snake River
and
and threw Greta out.
and he got to talking to us and liking us, and all of a sudden he ran into the bank, threw me into the river, and Peggy came pretty fast.
Well, I was hanging underneath and pushed her back in, and then I got back into the boat too. But no, I think that was a good one. But just so many of them. And the only thing I can say is we've been to all 48 states, and I'm not going to Alaska or Hawaii until I get a bridge built there. I'm not going to fly. And
the world was much better then.
yeah. And it was changing though in the 60s and 70s, and that was, I'm not saying difficult because you had to go with the flow and everything, but it was different than the 50s, and it was very fast. In other words, 50s were just about the same all the way through, and then suddenly you hit the 60s and 70s, and it was changing fast. Or, of course, a lot of new inventions and everything like that. So you had to adjust, and it was okay. But nostalgia still plays a big part in what the other days were and everything. But 60 they were okay.
It was better than okay, because the way life is now is hard for the kids. It's just hard. I would hate to think of raising them now. It would be hard for them.
I think the big thing that changed in that period was the Korean War. I mean, the Vietnam War. Because you had, for the first time, you had people that were diametrically opposed and were, you almost come to blows over it. You say, I don't think we should be there. We should be there. Well, in the other days growing up, you may disagree with somebody, but hey, no big deal. We'll just go ahead. We're still friends, even though I don't agree with you. But then starting then and even carrying over is like you disagreed, and no, I ain't going to associate with that person anymore. You don't like them. You don't like what they said. And that started then, and that's why it was a little bit different than 40s and 50s. One thing that I've tried to do for a number of years, that on Valentine's Day I gave her a bunch of tulips, because remembering her dad always had tulips in the backyard, so I always have a pot of tulips around on Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of a tradition, and I don't know whether we have any others.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Well,
anything.
for years we'd go out and cut a Christmas tree down and have somebody thinking they were from Sweden and tried to throw the big pole over and everything, and so we did that for a number of years. I think you got in on one of those.
Scottish
Yeah.
Highlands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing, But as far as other traditions, that's about.
We always went in your old blue truck that had
Well, that's to get
dents
the
and
tree, yeah, and everything.
everything in it, and then we cut down a rotten tree.
That was a Kansas cedar.
Yeah, it was a Kansas cedar.
I remember going tree cutting one day with you guys.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
Oh yeah, that's a fun memory I got.
Well, the other thing we did when we lived in Natchez, and Greta would be involved in this too, that with the monks up there and everything, we always had, suppers of wild game or something like frog leg fries or, pheasant, quail fries, that type of thing. But nothing that we, other than just what we always kind of did. No big traditions other than that, I don't think. Pat, can you
Well,
remember
I
any?
kind of think we might not think of it as a tradition, but your annual trip up to Minnesota.
Oh,
to see
yes,
Judy
okay.
was.
Yeah, we worked in the camp up there. I worked in the camp, and then Greta came up, and then we were the first married couple that worked in the boys' camp together. She was in the post office warehouse, and then I was one of the directors. And so we did that for a number of years, and then started a children's program at one of the resorts up there after we were married and after Pat was born. But we've been going to Minnesota. We have a friend up here, Judy Morgan, and she has a cabin on Pelican Lake, which you've been to. And we've been going up there, figured at least 35 or 40 years. And this last summer was the only time we haven't been up there. I think those days are pretty well gone. And still correspond with a couple of the guys that I worked with up there, campers that are doctors now and everything. But yeah, I would say that was tradition, going up there every year. Had to be. Greta always was afraid I was going to move her up there because I liked Minnesota so well.
Wouldn't have been so bad. Minnesota's fun.
It's cold.
You guys are forgetting a big tradition. The pass game every Christmas Eve. That's one I always think about.
Oh.
Yeah.
That I consider that a tradition for sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
that got introduced to your generation. We didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, what are the
Before-
origins?
I don't, who you started that when yeah, she started that, but I can't remember how many years ago.
I don't remember doing it as a kid. And
I don't think we did.
think until the grandkids came around that we started doing that.
I think you're right. I would say education, teaching. I enjoyed the classroom, and I was very proud that I thought I was a pretty good teacher. And I've had kids tell me that I was a good teacher, all the way through. And so I always felt like that I could, do that pretty well. So I would say that one of the big accomplishments was being a teacher. Administration was fine, but I enjoyed the classroom.
And I taught also, and with my best friend, we were both teachers, and it was just special. We had a good time doing that. That was great.
Ooh. Oh, I like to think, maybe a sense of humor. I always try to keep things pretty light, and no matter where I'm at or who I'm with or new people or otherwise, and I found out it works a lot easier to deal with people sometimes. You got humor. And I know when I was working with, doing the crop adjusting and everything, I found that if a guy was a little bit sober and I could get, knowing, you try to figure out in the first 15 seconds whether this guy meant business or whether he was something else. And I figured, okay, if I can get him to smile or laugh a little bit with a joke or, his sense of humor would go a lot easier. And I found it did. It worked out real good for me. And I have some other stories I wouldn't be able to tell on here about some of them. But anyhow, I would say sense of humor. I always tried to have jokes or, something like that and keep things light and not take things seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's only a handful of times I've ever seen you and you didn't immediately go cracking jokes and making us laugh and whatnot. So I love that. Grandma, anything?
I just was along with him with the jokes.
I would say the big thing is you're going to have some ups and downs, and everything, but you have to work through them, and it may not be right away, but you have to work through them and have a sense of humor about things, keep things in perspective, You're still different, and you need, you're together. We've been 65 years, but you still need a little bit of space from time to time too. So it just, but you have to go through them, and I'm thinking a sense of humor right now. I always, try to keep her pretty light with sense of humor, like saying, do you think you can make it out of that car, by the time we're going to eat or whatever, So you just have to work through these things,
Grandma?
That's true.
Well, I would say life has been good. I cannot complain. It wouldn't change. The only thing I'd probably change is that when we're growing up, with the kids and everything, didn't always got to do the things we probably should have done, because always worried a little bit about finances, being a school teacher and everything. But other than that, I wouldn't change a thing, really. They've been very, very fortunate, very lucky, health-wise and otherwise.
That's true. That's true.